Hello to everyone who is here today. Hi, I'm Riahu. I'm part of the Steam business team at Valve. Among the many other things that we do, we talk to you, developers, about what you're looking for on Steam, what we can do better for you, feedback, and all that stuff. I'll pass it on to these guys.
Welcome. My name is Alden Kroll. I'm a designer at Valve. I've been working on Steam for almost 20 years, so I've helped build out a lot of the features that exist on Steam, both the customer-facing features, but also the features you interact with as game developers as you prepare your games for release, configure settings, understand all the data that we're reporting to you. So I like coming to these kinds of events to hear what kind of questions you have and help share knowledge about how things work, but also gather feedback on what should I be doing when I go back and sit at my desk? What should I be working on next?
Hi, everybody. My name is Erik Peterson. I work on the Steam business team, and the Steam business team's role is primarily to work with the developers and publishers who distribute their games on Steam. I spend a lot of my time talking to devs, answering questions, talking about Steam features. I spend a lot of my time also making videos and content to try to help explain how Steam works and to answer questions. So hopefully I'll be able to answer some more questions for you today, and we're interested to get your feedback as well.
Great. We'll just get going then. So first question is from Paul. Are there plans to provide a daily breakdown of metrics from the Steam Announcements and Events tool?
This is an Alden question.
We have plans for everything at all times, I'm sure, but it's somewhere on our list. It's the way that we figure out how to prioritize the things that we work on and the features that we add is exactly requests like this. So when we come to events like this and we hear multiple people asking for the same kind of thing, that gives us a lot of confidence that that is something that we should prioritize and put time and energy into before other things. So simply hearing your question helps us figure out that that's something that's relevant and interesting to you. And makes it more likely that we'll be able to bump that up our list. So we don't have concrete plans at the moment, but that's a helpful request. Thank you.
Our next question is from Daniel. Can Steam provide auto-translation services for your store page, I assume? A machine translation tool being available by default for studios would be extremely useful. For those of you joining us who weren't part of the last session, we shared a slide that showed that about 66% of users on Steam do not have English set as their primary language, which is where this statistic that Daniel was referencing is coming from. But over to you.
I don't think that there are any current plans for auto-translation. I mean, I think one concern in thinking about that is just making sure that whatever the auto-translation was actually accurate and useful for you. And, every game is different. So I think, we would be concerned about providing, something like a feature like that wouldn't describe your game in exactly the way that you would want it to, but you can certainly use tools like that for your store page description, and if that worked for you, it's something that you could look at.
Blank question. Next question from Bob from Legal. Can you just demystify the benefits of wish listing with regards to viewability, which I think is probably visibility for us, and boosting?
Oh, my favorite topic. Yeah, let's talk about wish lists and visibility. So about a year ago or a little longer ago, I worked on a video. I highly recommend checking it out. Just self-plug. It's about visibility on Steam, and it explains some of the inputs that actually matter when it comes to algorithmic visibility and curated marketing on Steam. Like what actually drives additional visibility. And one of the things that I talk about is wish lists. And wish lists are a topic that comes up every time that we talk to developers. I mean, we were just at Gamescom last week. It was probably the #1 topic that we talked about there, or one of them. The way that wish lists function is, wish lists are really designed to be a metric that measures customer, kind of interest in your game. But that metric can mean a lot of different things. Customers wish list for different reasons. Some customers wish list because they're like, I'm going to buy that game on day 1 when that launches. And other customers it's a bookmark for them. And that's an interesting game. I might want to check that out eventually. Or other customers might be, I'm definitely going to buy this game when it's 80% off. So customers have different reasons for wish listing. And so for that reason, the actual number of wish lists for a game and for other reasons doesn't directly impact visibility on Steam. So it is not one of the factors that that drives additional marketing or visibility on Steam, except for a very narrow case, which is popular upcoming, but even then, kind of an asterisk there. However, wishlists are really important, and there's an easy explanation for why they're important. Other than it's a great way to, to gauge kind of interest in your game. When a customer wishlists your game and the game releases, they will get an email. And some of those customers would then see that email and make a purchase. And that purchase would actually, kind of be an input into additional visibility of the game. They will also get an email when you discount your game 20% or more. Another opportunity to potentially kind of convert a customer from a wish list to a sale. Any time that a customer purchases the game, that is going to be an input that would actually matter for your visibility. So directly, wish lists have very little to no impact on visibility on Steam. Indirectly, they could have a very large impact on your visibility of your game. Hopefully that answers your question.
Oh, this does not fit in the... Okay, I'll read it out loud. Matt from Mangotronics has two different questions, so I'll start with the first one. In terms of discoverability tools, I've participated in multiple third-party events, but sometimes still end up getting buried under other events on the front page. Is there any work being done to resolve the issue of overlapping sales fests and events, or having an easy-to-access landing page for all active events?
Yeah, this is something that's come up more and more as we run both our own events on Steam and we host more and more third-party events on Steam. There's a variety of different ways that we look at each of those events and try to figure out which ones we can promote in a bigger way. Generally speaking, we're trying to find events that we think are going to be most relevant to players and figure out the appropriate level of featuring for those events at that time. But given how many events there are happening, and a lot of them may be attached to physical events that are actually happening at a very particular time in space, and the calendar of things is always moving because there's also big game releases that sometimes move suddenly. They move their release date and they decide to release a week early, or they delay their release. So like the calendar of things happening on Steam is kind of always ever changing. And we're trying to do our best to figure out which things we can promote in which different spots. And it does mean some things might get less visibility than other things. We try to be pretty transparent about that with event organizers. We know ahead of time. We're talking to them about how their game is, or how their event is going to get promoted and where it's going to get featured. But things always change, and so it's really hard to anticipate. We don't even really have perfect data about like which event necessarily is going to be the big event. A lot of times there's competing interests, and you can imagine also participating as a developer, choosing between, do I want to participate in a big broad event that has hundreds of games in it, or do I want to participate in a smaller event that maybe doesn't get as much visibility, but it has fewer games in it, so I'm competing against fewer games for that visibility. There's always kind of an imperfect set of data there to make those kinds of decisions. So I guess a lot of our recommendation is kind of like do the best you can with the information that you have, and know that we're trying to do the best that we can for you too, and just know that sometimes it doesn't work out perfectly.
The only thing I would add to that is, so I shared a statistic in the platform update last hour, and there were over 200 third-party events that we've hosted so far this year. That is a lot of events. Philosophically, I think that our approach is, we think that more events is a good thing, and philosophically, our approach is not to limit the number of events, to say like, oh, well, there can only be 100 events, and this is the way it goes. Typically, the way we think about it is, hey, more events are great, but what can we do to better target those events, or to better make it easier for customers to find the event that they're personally most excited about, rather than to artificially limit, a number of events.
Question 2 from Matt is, in regards to new subgenres emerging, can we suggest event themes directly?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please do.
Feel free, and this goes for kind of any question that you have about Steam. At the top of the Steamworks website, there's a button called Support that lets you pick from some different categories and then file a support ticket. That comes to the same people here that you see on the stage and the rest of the business team. So if you want to ask about hosting a particular event on Steam, please pitch it to us, and we can talk through the details of how that might work and what we're looking for. We also have a great set of documentation that describes the ins and outs of how to run an event on Steam. So if you have a really cool little niche that you're developing your game in, and you see that there's a bunch of other games that also are in that same niche, that would be a great thing to run an event around. It's useful to know that we kind of think about these events, there's kind of a sweet spot in the size, in that you can imagine events that are too big. We ran once a theme fest called Strategy Fest, and we realized that about at least a quarter of the catalog is labeled as strategy, so that's way too broad. But then on the flip side, if it's just your game and two others, then that doesn't really feel like that's actually a genre. That's maybe just a couple of games, or maybe a little bit too self-serving. So we're trying to look for something that's kind of a sweet spot where there's enough games that the customers understand that this is a genre. I can see the set of games. All the games that I would expect to find in this genre are part of that event. So those are some of the things that we're looking for as we evaluate events to run on Steam proposed by third-party organizers.
But as Alden said, we'd love to hear from you. And Steam support tickets don't get sent to a black hole. They're actually answered by real people. I was answering support tickets earlier this morning. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Next question from Jacob Kennedy. What direction or improvements is Steam looking to make with proactive discoverability tools? I've talked with both devs and users that express a bit of frustration with the discovery queue and refer them instead to the interactive recommender, which is much better but ironically harder to discover itself.
I love the interactive recommender. I'm a big fan. I mean, Alden, this is probably a question for you, but I mean, I think we're always thinking about ways that we can improve discoverability on Steam and to make recommendations better. And if there are tools that we can provide that are interactive in some way, I think that's cool. But what do you think, Alden?
Yeah, I mean, we're always thinking about new ways of recommending games to users and new features where helping players discover games. One of the most recent things that we added to Steam is if you go to any of the tag pages or genre pages in Steam, the first thing you're going to find there is a very trailer-focused player. So that is a new widget that we created in the last few months. We call it the trailer carousel. It's really, it starts by being your trailer, the game's trailer there, with some metadata about the game, and then it auto kind of switches through a number of different games. So the idea there is to really show people what it's like to play the game. So we try to pick the gameplay trailers to show in that space. Also, as a side tangent, as you're working on trailers for your game, the thing that people are looking for is what it's like to play your game. So keep that in mind as you're cutting your trailer, and at least for your store page. So that's an example of an evolution and an iteration of some of the discovery features on Steam is making it easier for players to see based on the trailer, which is kind of eye-catching. And now that we've added that to those pages, I find it mesmerizing to just sit there and watch trailers go by, and definitely discover a lot of new games that way myself.
I've seen him do it in the office, it's true. A question from Nick. I'm making a multiplayer indie game that will be free to play. How does that impact the algorithms? Any tips or wisdom for free to play indie games?
Wow, that's a good question. The first thing I would say is it being free to play or indie, it really has almost no impact on visibility. There's no, it's not like Steam's making a decision to say this is an indie game or this is, there's no value judgment or something about that. Steam is looking for indications of customer interest. And as I mentioned in that video I referenced earlier, the most concrete measure of customer interest that we can get is revenue, because that's a concrete action that a user can take. Doesn't get much more concrete than here is my money. I'm really into this thing. From a customer standpoint. But a couple of things to think about when it comes to kind of visibility. So there's visibility is driven by a few things on Steam. One is customer interest, but the other is personalization. So I play a lot of free-to-play games. So my my front page, particularly the featured and recommended section, is a lot of free-to-play games. And so we do a lot of work into kind of making those recommendations better and to be recommending games to people that are that are relevant to them. And so if you are making a free-to-play indie game, a couple of kind of thoughts. One is trying to get a bunch of players into the game as possible. I mean, that's kind of a stupid thing to say out loud because, of course, you're going to already try to do that. But that can have an impact when it comes to, I think, kind of player referral or players seeing games on their friends list, being curious about games that their friends are playing. And revenue will come eventually, maybe, or maybe you're not going to monetize the game at all, and that's fine too. But there are opportunities for featuring for all types of games, including a indie kind of free-to-play multiplayer game. Alden, is there anything that you would add to that?
I think just the distinction that there are a couple of lists where we have popular games, and we've split. So on the front page, there's a new and trending list, and we also have a trending free games list there too. So people, it turns out players like free stuff. So great, you're making a free thing. It's going to be really easy for them to get into and start playing right away. And people love to browse the free-to-play genre hub on Steam. And they also like to browse that tab that's lower down on the front page that's called Trending Free. So those are some dedicated places where we have for featuring the free-to-play games. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, the free-to-play hub is, I think a lot of people sleep on that, but that's a huge generator for kind of new players because there's a lot of players around the world who are just looking for the next free thing to play. So it's good.
We've got a question from Matt. What are the 2 biggest mistakes you see indie creators making when listing their title on Steam?
I'll give you one, which is my go-to. Ria's heard me say this a million times, but I think my number one piece of advice these days is launching your game on Steam is not a marketing plan. I think that it's really important. I mean, these days, I think that this information is widely available, and I think a lot of folks out there have shared this on YouTubes and Discords, et cetera. But I think it's really important to think about doing the work ahead of your launch to raise as much awareness around your game as possible, whether that's trying to generate genuine, kind of legitimate wish lists from a community of customers that you are building over time, whether that's building your Discord or going to shows, going to meetups, like just getting as many players interested in your game as possible. We're using playtest, NextFest, anything that you can do to kind of raise awareness around your game. But I think the biggest mistake, which is I think what the question was, would be put all of this work and heart and blood and sweat and tears into your game and then not do any awareness raising around your game and to just launch it and hope for the best. There are examples of games like that doing really well. So for every piece of advice that we can give you, there's a counterexample. But I don't think that that's getting setting yourself up for success. I think that probably trying to raise awareness for your game around launch it and doing the work to market your game, however it is that you want to market your game. That doesn't necessarily mean paid marketing. It could mean any way that you want to do it. But I think trying to raise awareness around your game ahead of launch is important. And here's the reason. I think that Steam, in general, is really good at reflecting and kind of referring customer interest. So when there is interest in a game, it does a really good job of showing that game to more players and understanding about the people who like that game and trying to recommend it to more people. What it is not designed to do is essentially take a game that we don't have very much data around or understand, and kind of generate interest in it. So I think that it's a really good opportunity for you as a developer to to raise awareness around your game ahead of launch. That would be one that I would say. Yeah.
All right, I'll try a second one.
Yeah.
Which is the other mistake that I've talked to game developers, I've seen game developers do this, is they develop a little bit too much in isolation. And I think the recommendation is you should play test everything about your game and about your communication about the game. So just like you might sit somebody down and watch them play your game and watch where they stumble, watch where they get confused, do the same thing with your trailer, do the same thing with your store page, do the same thing with however you're going to be communicating about your game publicly. Get that in front of people, get their feedback, see what their reactions are, and use that to really refine and hone and make sure that when you do put up your store page, it is a good, solid, accurate reflection of your game and sets player expectation accurately, and is also easy to comprehend and easy to love.
I love that. Can I add a third, like, mini bonus one? This is our time to, like, rant up here. But I feel really passionately about localization. I think it's a really important kind of topic, and I mention it because so in the platform update I shared, and I think Ria mentioned this, that 66% or over 66% of players do not have English set as their primary language. Localization can be difficult and expensive. And so it doesn't always make sense for a developer to localize their game into every possible language. Every game is different. Some games have a ton of voice and cinematics, and other games are simple puzzle games that have some text that they can localize, right? But if possible, localize your game into a number of other kind of languages, even if you're just running a test to try it. And the reason for that is that if you just have your game in English, then you're sort of missing out on a large part of the global audience. And Steam has grown so much, but it has also grown so diverse and is kind of a really truly global platform now. And I think that it would be a mistake to only have your game in English, and you'd be missing out on potential to reach so many more players that could be interested in playing your game.
Next question is from Chris. As far as the Steam storefront is concerned, are hidden myths or hidden gems real or a myth?
Yeah, so I think it's a theory that's hard to prove or disprove one way or the other. So often I'll hear people talk about a hidden gem and where they believe that I think what they're saying in their mind is that there's this game that has a bunch of potential and it never quite reached its potential. And I think it's always hard to prove whether that is the case or not. One way you can look at this is you might have a game and it only had, some small number of customers, but it has a really high review score. You could take that to mean that all of those customers were happy with it and that there is a lot more potential for happy customers. Or you could take that to mean all of the customers that wanted that kind of game found it and they love it. So it's really hard to prove one way or the other whether that game actually has a lot more potential and if it just got more visibility. But what we try to do with the way that we built Steam and the platform is that when we have signals of customer interest in a game, then Steam has more confidence to show that game to more players. If there are games on the platform where there are no signals of confidence in that game, so there's no customer interest shown in that game, then it's really hard for us to justify showing that game to more people because we have zero data to tell whether people are going to be more interested in it or not. Over the years, we've run lots of experiments with different games that people say, oh, this is a hidden gem, that's a hidden gem. And we try, for example, like show that game on the front page for a while. And what we found is that act alone is not the determining factor. It may move a few dozen extra units for that game or a few hundred extra units for that game, but proportional to how much visibility it takes to actually move that needle, that was not the way forward. The way forward is to make Steam more personalized so that game can show up on the front page to the people that are most likely interested in it. So what we found over time is that more and more games can find their niche and find success with the audience that is interested in that kind of game. And that may be 1,000 people, that may be 100,000 people, that may be 1 million people. It's going to depend a lot on the game, how good it is, how unique it is, how special it is in that space. But we're always kind of tuning and fine-tuning how these systems work to try to make sure that the games that are interesting to players can find those players on the platform.
The next question is from Rory. Sorry, I edited your question down a bit because it was going to be too long to fit on this. But is improper genre tagging something that Steam looks into, or is Steam more hands-off, specifically with the tags that we see on the Steam source page?
We're pretty hands-off in the tags that are applied to games, unless we can tell that it's intentionally misrepresenting. In those cases, it's usually customers that are having some fun by applying totally incorrect tags.
Psychological horror.
Yeah, so every once in a while, players like to have some fun and apply totally incorrect tags. And by the way, as a game developer, you have the ability to always ban tags from your store page. So if you see somebody is applying incorrect tags to your store page, you can always remove that. If there's cases where developers are applying the wrong tags to their own game, I think we sort of see that as sort of a self-healing problem, because what's going to happen is like those games are going to end up with a bunch of confused customers coming to that game and wondering why they're there and why that game is getting recommended to them. They're not likely to buy it, or if they do buy it, they're probably going to be pretty unhappy with what they found. So I would highly recommend that you stick to the tags that are actually relevant and applicable and describe your game, or you're probably just going to be shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, I don't think it's beneficial to mistag your game.
Question from Cortex Games. What features on Steam are the most underutilized for indie game developers?
I'll give you my pet answer. Rich presence, I think. I think rich presence is really cool. It's a pretty simple thing to incorporate, and the part of the reason why I think it's a cool feature, and I don't see a lot of indie games incorporate it, is because I have a theory that I think that some customers like to shop from their friends list, to see what their friends are playing, like when I'm playing a game, I notice my friends reach out. Oh, what is that game? What's going on with that? Like, I want to learn more about it. And rich presence just kind of gives that additional little interest, that little flair, where if you're not familiar what rich presence is that on your friends list, you can see kind of what your friend is doing in that game, and it requires some integration. But it gives that additional kind of reason to reach out to your friend, like, oh, tell me about the Shadow Labyrinth level that you're in, or like what's going on with, in this match, you're doing this thing. So it's just an additional kind of feature that I think could be utilized more and is a cool thing to use.
I have a slight twist on this question, or at least the answer to this question, which is probably not as many features. You may not need to use or want to use as many features as you think. Like Steam is not a checklist of features, so it's really, we offer a lot of features both to developers and players, and we know that not everyone applies to you as a developer, not everyone applies to different customers. So it's really important to look through those features and figure out which ones make sense for the game that you're building and your development process and style, and for the features that you want to be able to support in your game, what kind of functionality. So obviously, like multiplayer and matchmaking doesn't make sense for a whole bunch of games. Controller support may not make sense for your game if your game relies heavily on very precise mouse movements, for example. So it's really important that you consider each of the features that Steam does offer and makes your own judgment calls about how that applies to your game and whether it makes sense to your game. Something like rich presence can be pretty generally useful and applicable, but a lot of the features that Steam supports are very specific and tailored. Like early access is not a good mode for every game. Like even running a playtest is not the right thing for every game. Even building a demo may not be the right thing for your game. So you really have to think about what are your goals in your development path and which of these features can help you in your goal, and which of the features just feel like a checklist item that you're doing because somebody else said that you should do that.
Yeah, features you should think about them like a menu rather than, a checklist. Yeah.
I have my own feature that I'm going to talk about even though I'm a moderator
Please do.
here. One thing I think that people aren't necessarily super aware of is when it comes to refunds, customers are able to give you a reason why they refunded. Not everyone does, but what they say is included in the refund report in the back end, and that can be a really useful tool to understand what's going on in between the sort of expectation that the customer had with the game and then the experience that they had that was negative or poor or not what they were looking for enough that they went and did a refund. So I would recommend you take a look at that once your game is released, just to better level set what people are saying about your game.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Kind of related, Fred asks, what Steam features can help devs more efficiently gather feedback from their community?
Steam playtest is going to be my default answer. It's not, as Alden mentioned, it may not be right or ready for every game, but Steam playtest is a really valuable tool for gathering feedback specifically. It doesn't have to be just ahead of the launch of your game. It can be after launch. I think recently we put out a video that kind of explains all the various ways you can test your game on Steam. We cover Steam Playtest in that video, but Steam Playtest is basically a sub app ID or child app ID to your main app ID that you can, has a separate build, doesn't have reviews. It's just, it's a way for you to, engage with the community in kind of any way that you want, a small community, a big community, et cetera, and get feedback, from your community about your game. And then you can direct folks to give you feedback however you want. You could put a big button in your Steam Playtest that says, email us or go to the Discord or whatever it is that you want to do. So I would say that is the most obvious answer on a way to get feedback. But as I mentioned, it doesn't have to be just before the launch of your game. You can use Steam Playtest post-launch. There are some good examples of that on Steam lately, where developers have used it to test a new feature for their game. The Rift Breaker, for example, used it to test their multiplayer feature for their game. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, and I think it's also useful to think of the progression of your development and what tools are going to be useful for getting feedback at different stages in that process. Like early on, you're probably going to want to grab some friends and just sit them down in front of your game and see where they fail and see where they get confused. And then as you get more polished and refined, then you may bring it to an event like this and sit down total strangers and have them play through it and see where they fail and see where they run into issues and get lost and confused. And then as you get more confidence in iterating and resolving those issues, then you can go wider and use Steam Playtest, bring in more people. You can have a demo that you run for a while and use that to gather feedback. And every one of these opportunities, make it as easy as possible for players to submit feedback in whatever channel you're most comfortable receiving that feedback and managing that feedback. So whether that's supporting to a Discord channel or some forums or filing a support ticket through your Zendesk instance or any of those kinds of things. It's up to you how you want to gather that feedback, but think about how that whole process works from your early days to as you get more and more confident and you need more volumes of people giving you that feedback.
And different tools would be more appropriate at various phases of development.
Kind of going back to how the algorithm works. If a game has good sales, but not a lot of user reviews, does this affect the algorithm?
No, it really doesn't. The number of user reviews really doesn't really have an impact on algorithmic visibility or curated marketing. Another thing to mention about user reviews, I don't think the question is about this, but sometimes we get the question, I'll just use this opportunity to talk anyway. Sometimes we get the question about whether the user score, the review score matters when it comes to visibility. The answer to that is largely no, unless your game is in negative territory, so below 40%, in which case Steam would be less likely to recommend your game. Other than that, it has very little impact at all. So for the most part, if you're wondering if you need to stress out because your game went from 83 to 81, no, it doesn't have any impact on visibility.
I'm going to add on to that. It doesn't have any impact on the algorithm, but don't forget that there's a very human aspect behind every customer that's looking at your game. So the difference between an 83 and an 81 to Steam matters very little, but to a customer who's looking at your page for the first time, they might have feelings about that, and we can't adjust for that. So not on our side, but it definitely matters to some percentage of your audience.
Absolutely.
Jeff asks, does Steamworks have plans to make its services more functional for those of us with cross-platform ambitions?
Yeah, that's long been a desire of ours. The tricky part is that a lot of the features have been written from the ground up with Steam as an account system in the background, so it makes it hard to abstract it across multiple platforms. It is something that has been on our mind, and we've been thinking about how we could approach something like that, but we don't have concrete plans right now.
Question from Joe. What skills can students learn from posting their student projects on Steam?
So many. I don't know. I mean, like, if I were talking to a student, I'd ask them, what do you want to learn? I mean, do you want to get feedback from players, like we discussed, feedback from players on kind of various aspects of your game, or game design, or user interface? You can learn about marketing, just in games in general or on Steam by posting a game and learning about kind of what works and what capsule images tend to work, and how to market with a trailer and how to make your game actually interesting. So, I mean, I would say that there's a lot to learn. It just kind of depends on what an individual student was hoping to get out of it.
Yeah, I think we can all learn from the process of going through something more than once. So as a student, it seems like a great opportunity to post something and share it with the world. And I wouldn't necessarily expect that you're going to sell 1 million units of it, but you're going to learn a lot along the way, just the process of what does it take to set up a store page, how do people react to different parts of the store page and the game and the communication. So I think there's a huge amount of learning opportunity there, and the more times you go through that process, the better you're going to get, and the more that you're going to understand about how to interact with people in that space and how to deliver on the expectations that you set by the store page, and how to properly set those expectations to begin with.
I mean, the learning doesn't stop. I learn something on Steam every day. I'm always surprised by something that somebody is trying for the first time, and so I think we can all learn something.
Oh, it fits. Curious Matt would like to know, is there a way for developers to get insight into in-app purchases for other games on Steam? Some third-party sites will estimate revenue, but usually freemium games will just show $0. Is the freemium market tenable for indies on Steam?
Well, we don't, for obvious reasons, we don't share the revenue of other games, because we're protective of your data. If games want to share their data, they're welcome to do that, but we're not going to share that. I would say that pretty much all business models are tenable or can work on Steam. It just really depends on the game and kind of what's being presented to the user, and if the game's compelling, and if users feel like they're getting some good value, and if it's a fun game. So I don't know that there's too much of a conclusion that can be drawn from a particular business model. It's just going to depend on the game.
I think the one thing that you could learn from looking at other games with in-app purchases is look at what they appear to be doing well, and if they have a large player base that is sustained over a long period of time, then well, they're probably earning enough money to stay in business and keep operating that game, so they must be doing something right. So it's useful to look at how is the monetization set up in that game, and how are players interacting with it? What about it makes it fun? It can be challenging to make an ecosystem in your game that is the right balance of in-app purchases, that people are buying things that feel meaningful or interesting without meaningfully impacting gameplay of other people, especially in a multiplayer world. So there's some delicate balance there. If we go back a long time in Valve history, you can look at examples of like Team Fortress 2 that originally cost money to buy, and over time we transitioned that to be a free-to-play game. But we did so carefully and learned a lot along each step of that way to make sure that we could have a self-sustaining ecosystem in the game of microtransactions before we made it completely free-to-play. And so I guess my advice might be looking for clues and feedback of how can you gain confidence that the way that you're structuring microtransactions and in-app purchases in your game is going to be compelling and rewarding to customers to the point where they will want to engage with that system and do so in a way that can sustain your business. So again, probably a bunch of that is play testing and getting it in front of people and gaining some of that confidence early in the development.
Question from Baron. What effects do you see demos having on customer interaction with pre-release titles, and how does it compare with early access?
Yeah, so I think we look at demos and early access as two very different things and solving two very different goals for game developers. Demos can solve a couple of different problems. In particular, letting people try out the game before they invest in purchasing in the game. Also, even before the game is available for purchase, demos have become a big part of events like Steam Next Fest, where it is an event that is entirely built around giving people the chance to try out games before they're released. And that's a really different model than early access, where early access is really intended to be a framework of messaging to help set player expectations that you as a developer want to continue developing the game with both paying customers in the game and giving you feedback along the way. So that can be a really different, and if you're going into early access, you would want to be doing so very deliberately with the idea that you want to engage with the community in that way of getting their feedback, incorporating that into your product and development decision making, and showing the community that you're working with them in that way. Whereas a demo doesn't have that kind of context. A demo is more like, here is a slice of the gameplay. It is maybe carefully crafted so that it's a good kind of end-to-end experience and leaves people wanting more of the game at the end of that experience, and really as a promotional tool. The effect of these kinds of things is really hard to study at a broad scale because so many games are so different from each other. So every game has a slightly different trajectory. So it's hard to sort of aggregate this data and be able to say, oh, it has X percentage improvement or boost on sales. That's really hard to measure because some games are going to do amazing and some games are going to do really poorly. And a lot of that is going to come down to, well, how good was the demo? Was it good at hooking players, at convincing them to keep playing, convincing them that they wanted the full game? So there's a lot of variables at play there. It's really hard to say, you should do this or you shouldn't do that. The answers to these kind of questions are rarely so black and white. It's a lot of nuance in, well, as you're thinking about which of these models you want to apply to your game, you want to look at what are the good examples of demos that you've played? How can you follow that same pattern? What can you learn from those demos about how long their demo was, where it ended, how did they end that in maybe at a cliffhanger where that as a player you really want to continue that story or you really want to continue that gameplay. So the art of crafting those kind of experiences is going to be part of the challenge of coming up with a product of your game and your promotional activities like demos along the way.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that. That's a pretty good explanation, Alden. But the only thing I would add is that, to Alden's point about early access and demos serving different goals. I mean, I like to think about early access as a development tool. It's like almost a way of developing your game alongside your community and in hand with your community, listening to feedback, incorporating feedback, communicating. The advantage of early access is you get all of this awesome feedback that you can use to make your game better. And the trade-off, or not even a trade-off, like the work that you're signing up for along with that is communication. You need to be communicating with your community about what's happening, what you're working on next, what your goals are, et cetera. Demos, so early access is not a marketing tool. It's not designed for that. It's a development tool. Demos are a marketing tool, are a promotional tool. They have been since the dawn of video games. Now, to Alden's point, is a demo going to succeed in your goal of promoting your game? Well, it depends on the demo. These days, demos are, there's no question that demos on Steam are more valuable than they used to be because of Next Fest and because of the opportunity for featuring and kind of visibility in Next Fest, and that because customers are using Next Fest as a tool to discover new games. But the fact remains, as it always has, a bad demo is probably going to discourage players, and a good demo is going to excite players. And it really comes down to kind of your execution of that demo. But they're two totally separate things.
I think we do need to be aware of time. We're at the end of our 45 minutes here, and we all have other important talks to go see. So thank you all for joining us, and I apologize. I'm sure we didn't get to all of your questions, but these are excellent questions. I hope you all got something out of this. And if we didn't get to answer your question, please use the support link at the top of Steamworks. Send us your question. We will absolutely answer that there too.
And thank you for coming today.